There's a truth we often struggle to hold on to when life gets hard. God's timing is never wrong. We may not always understand it, we may not always see it, but his timing is always right. There are moments in life when we find ourselves asking, why God? Why now? Why not now? Why me? We pray, we hope, we wait, and still the doors remain closed. The opportunities we thought were ours slip away. The plans we carefully made unravel before our eyes, and that's when doubt creeps in, whispering lies that maybe God has forgotten us, or maybe he's not listening. But let me tell you something, he is. He always is. And he's never late. I've seen it time and time again, people burdened by worry, hearts heavy with fear because things didn't work out the way they expected. Maybe that's you right now. Maybe you've knocked on every door you can find and every single one stayed shut. Maybe you've prayed for a breakthrough, but all you've gotten is silence. Maybe you feel like you're stuck in a season of waiting and you're beginning to wonder if God will ever show up. I understand that feeling. We all do. But I want to encourage you today, don't worry. God is working, even when you can't see it. He's preparing something better than you could imagine. You see, we're often in such a hurry. We want things now. We live in a world that moves faster than ever before. We want answers instantly. We want success overnight. We want our prayers answered the moment we say amen. But God's ways are not our ways. His timing is not our timing, and thank God for that. Because if we got everything we wanted exactly when we wanted it, we might miss what's truly best for us. Sometimes God withholds something because we're not ready for it. Sometimes he waits because the blessing he has for us isn't ready yet. And sometimes he holds us back because he's protecting us from something we can't see. Think back over your life. I'm sure there are moments you can recall when you didn't get what you wanted, and later you realized it was a blessing in disguise. Maybe it was a job you desperately hoped for, but if you had gotten it, it would have taken you away from your family. Maybe it was a relationship you wanted to work out, but God knew it would have broken you more than you could handle. Maybe it was a dream you chased, but if you had caught it, it would have led you down a path far from God's plan for your life. We don't always see it in the moment, but God sees the whole picture. He sees what we cannot. He knows what's ahead. And he knows exactly when the right door needs to open. I remember someone once sharing how they had prayed for a particular opportunity for years. They were sure it was right. They had done everything they could to prepare for it. But no matter what they did, the door stayed shut. They grew discouraged. They started to believe that maybe God had forgotten them. But one day, years later, a different door opened, one they had never considered. And when they stepped through it, they realized it was better than anything they had ever asked for. Looking back, they could see that if God had opened that first door, they would have settled for something far less than what he had planned. That's the kind of God we serve. He loves us too much to let us settle. He loves us too much to give us what we want if it's not what we need. And he loves us enough to say, not yet, when our hearts are crying out right now. I know it's not easy. Waiting is hard. Trusting when you can't see is hard. But faith grows in the waiting. Trust deepens in the silence. And when the time is right, when God knows you're ready and the blessing is ready, he will open the right gate. You won't have to force it. You won't have to break it down. It will swing open with ease, and you'll know it was him. It was always him. So don't lose heart. Don't let worry steal your peace. Don't let doubt drown out your faith. God is at work even when the doors are closed, even when you're waiting, even when you don't understand. He's preparing the way. And when the time is right, he will open the gate. You can trust him. You can rest in him because his timing is perfect every single time. I know what it feels like when a door closes right in front of you. You stood there hopeful, expectant, maybe even certain that this was the door God wanted you to walk through. You prayed about it, you prepared for it, and everything seemed to be lining up until suddenly it wasn't. The door slammed shut, and you were left standing there wondering what went wrong. You felt disappointed. Maybe you felt hurt. Maybe you even felt a little angry with God. You asked, Lord, why? Why would you let me come this far only to let it end like this? I understand that feeling. We've all been there. Closed doors can feel like rejection. They can feel like failure. And if we're not careful, we can let those closed doors convince us that we missed our chance, or worse, that God has forgotten about us. But I want you to hear this today. A closed door is not the end of your story. It's not a sign that God has abandoned you. It's a sign that he is leading you. Because when God closes a door, it's always for a reason. Always. Sometimes God closes a door because he's protecting you. You can't see what's on the other side, but he can. You thought that opportunity was perfect. You thought that relationship was the one. You thought that job would finally give you the security you needed, but God saw what you couldn't. He saw the heartbreak, the struggle, the burden that was waiting behind that door. And because he loves you, he closed it. Not to hurt you, but to save you. There are times in life when we don't understand why something didn't work out until years later. And when we look back, we realize that what we thought was a rejection was actually God's protection. Other times, a closed door is God's way of redirecting you. You were walking toward one path, but God knew he had something better for you down another road. If he had let you walk through that door, you might have missed the gate he was preparing further ahead. You see, our vision is limited. We only see what's right in front of us, but God sees the whole picture. He knows the plans he has for you. Plans to give you hope in a future. And sometimes those plans mean rerouting you, set your heart on something that wasn't meant to be. I remember talking to someone who had their heart set on a business venture. They put their time, their money, their passion into it. They did everything right. And still it failed. They were crushed. They questioned everything. Had they not prayed enough? Had they made a mistake? But years later, they found themselves in a different line of work when they never would have chosen back then. And it turned out to be not only more successful, but far more fulfilling than anything they had imagined. That failure, that closed door, was the very thing that led them to their true calling. That's how God works. What looks like a setback is often a set for something greater. What feels like the end is often the beginning of a new chapter 1 written by his hand, not ours. But in those moments, it's easy to let disappointment cloud our faith. It's easy to let worry take over and convince us that we'll never get another chance. That's the enemy talking. That's fear talking, but God's word says otherwise. He says he will work all things together for good for those who love him. Not some things, all things, even the closed doors, even the disappointments, even the no's. So when you come to a door that doesn't open, when the opportunity passes you by, when the relationship doesn't work out, when the dream seems to die, don't let worry consume you. Don't let doubt take root. Instead, look at that closed door and say, God, I trust you. I may not understand this right now, but I know you're leading me. I know you're protecting me. And I know you're preparing the right gate for me. Because that's the truth. God's not finished with you. He's not closing doors to punish you. He's closing them because he loves you. He's closing them because he's guiding you towards something far greater than you can see right now. And when the time is right, when you're standing in front of the gate, he's prepared just for you. It will open. You won't have to force it. You won't have to fight for it. It will open with ease. And you'll know it was God all along. You'll look back at every closed door, every tear, every moment of doubt, and you'll say, thank you, Lord. You knew what I couldn't see. You led me to the right gate. And when that day comes, you'll know that every closed door was worth it. One of the greatest battles we face in life is the temptation to compare our path to someone else's. We see others moving forward, doors flying open for them while we seem to be standing still. We see their families thriving, their careers taking off, their dreams coming true, and we start to wonder, Lord, what about me? Did you forget me? Am I doing something wrong? That's the kind of thinking that can wear a person down. It can fill your heart with worry and drain your faith before you even realize it's happening. But let me tell you something today. God's plan for your life is not supposed to look like anyone else's. It was never meant to. We are all on a journey, but none of our journeys are identical. God is not working from a single blueprint, handing out the same blessings at the same time to everyone. He is a personal God. He is crafting your story with his hands. He knows every detail of your life, your struggles, your strengths, your fears, your dreams. And he is shaping a path for you that is designed perfectly for who you are and who he's calling you to be. But when we start looking at other people's past, we lose sight of our own. We begin to doubt the timing of God. And we start thinking we need to rush, we need to catch up. We need to push open doors that God never intended us to walk through. There was a young woman I met once who struggled with this very thing. She was faithful, she loved the Lord, and she had dreams in her heart. But every time she looked around, it seemed like everyone else was moving ahead. Her friends were getting married, building families, achieving their goals, and she felt stuck. She started to believe something was wrong with her. She started to believe that maybe God had overlooked her. But let me tell you what happened years later. When God opened the right gate in her life, it all made sense. He brought her into a season of blessing that was so much richer than she had ever hoped for. And when she looked back, she realized that had she forced her way through those doors, earlier had she tried to write her own story, she would have missed the beauty of what God had prepared. That's the danger of comparison. It blinds us to the work God is doing in our own lives. It steals our peace and replaces it with anxiety. It causes us to question God's goodness instead of trusting His timing. But what God is doing in someone else's life has nothing to do with what He's doing in yours. Their success is not your failure. Their open doors are not your closed doors. God not limited. He is not running out of blessings. He is more than able to do a new thing in your life in His perfect time. Maybe you've been looking at others feeling like you're falling behind. Maybe you've watched friends step into opportunities you've only dreamed about. Maybe you've scrolled through your phone late at night, seeing pictures of other people's joy while you've been battling your own struggles in silence. But hear me, God has not forgotten you. He is not in a hurry. He is not pressured by what society says you should have accomplished by now. He is working according to His perfect plan. And when the right gate opens, it will not matter who got there first. It will not matter how long you had to wait. Because what God has for you is for you. Your journey is your own. Your story is being written by the hand of the Creator. And when you understand that, you can let go of the pressure to keep up with others. You can find peace knowing that God's timing is never wrong. You can stop striving, stop comparing, and start trusting. You can rest in the promise that He is leading you to exactly where you need to be. So don't let the success of others make you doubt your own path. Don't let comparison make you forget that God is working behind the scenes in ways you cannot see. He is preparing the right gate for you, and when it opens, it will be everything you needed and more. You won't be late. You won't be left behind. You will be right on time, God's time. And when that day comes, you'll see that your path was never meant to match anyone else's. It was always meant to be yours. Worry is something we all know too well. It creeps in quietly at first, just a small thought. What if things don't work out? What if the door never opens? What if I'm not good enough? But that small thought grows, and before long it wraps itself around your heart like a chain, pulling you down with every step you try to take. Worry can weigh you down so much that you can't even see the path ahead anymore. You lose sight of God's promises because your eyes are fixed on the problems, but you don't have to live that way. You were never meant to live that way. Faith is what God calls us to. Faith is what sets you free. Worry and faith cannot rule your heart at the same time. One will always push the other out. If you let worry take the lead, faith will begin to fade. But if you choose faith, if you choose to believe that God is who He says He is that He is good, that He is faithful, then worry loses its grip. You may still hear its whispers, but faith will rise up and remind you that you are not walking this path alone. God is with you every step of the way. There was a man I knew who built his whole life on worry. He was a good man, but he was always afraid of losing what he had, afraid of making the wrong decision, afraid that he would miss his opportunity. So he held on tightly to everything, trying to control every detail of his life. But the tighter he held on, the more anxious he became. He was exhausted. He couldn't rest. He couldn't enjoy the blessings he already had because he was too busy worrying about what might happen tomorrow. But one day he reached the end of himself. He realized he couldn't carry that burden anymore. He got down on his knees and said, "Lord, I can't do this. I need you." And in that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. Not because all his problems went away, but because he finally let go. He placed his future into God's hands. And for the first time, he trusted that God would open the right gate when the time was right. That's the kind of peace faith brings. It doesn't mean you'll never face challenges. It doesn't mean every door will open exactly when you want it to. But it means you can walk through life knowing that you don't have to have all the answers because God does. You don't have to know what tomorrow holds because God holds tomorrow. Worry may try to tell you that everything is up to you, but faith reminds you that God is in control. I've seen it over people standing at a closed door, overwhelmed with fear, thinking that if they don't do something right now, they'll miss their chance. But faith says, God, I trust you. If this door is meant to open, you'll open it. And if it's not, I trust that you have something better. That kind of faith isn't always easy. It takes courage to stand still when the world tells you to rush. It takes strength to trust God when your heart is desperate for answers. But every time you choose faith over fear, you grow stronger. Every time you choose to trust God instead of giving in to worry, you take another step forward on the path He's laid out for you. God knows what you need. He knows when you need it. And He loves you far too much to let worry steal the joy He's placed before you. He's calling you to lay it down today. The fear, the doubt, the questions. He's calling you to lift your eyes off the closed doors and look to Him. Because when you trust Him, you'll see that He's already moving. He's already working. He's already preparing the right gate for you. So don't let worry control your heart. Don't let fear hold you back. Walk by faith, knowing that God is leading you. And when the right gate opens, you'll step through it with peace in your heart, knowing that it was always God who brought you there. There are times in life when everything seems still. You've prayed, you've waited, you've trusted, but nothing seems to be moving. You've been standing at what feels like a closed gate for so long that you start to wonder if it will ever open. Days turn into months and sometimes months into years, and in that waiting, doubt begins to whisper. Maybe this is all there is. Maybe God has forgotten. Maybe nothing is going to change. Those are hard moments. Waiting can test your faith like nothing else, but I want you to hear this today. God is working. Even when you can't see it, He is moving. Even when it feels like nothing is happening. So often we measure progress by what we can see. If doors are opening, we feel like we're moving forward. If opportunities are coming, we feel blessed. But what about when there's silence? What about when every prayer seems to go unanswered? That's when faith is truly tested, because faith is trusting God, not just when everything is clear, but when everything is uncertain. Faith is believing that God is at work behind the scenes, preparing what you cannot yet see. There was a man I met who waited for years for his situation to change. He needed a breakthrough financially, emotionally, spiritually. He prayed every day, but nothing seemed to move. He felt stuck, like his life was on pause while everyone else was moving ahead. But what he didn't realize was that God was working in ways he couldn't see. During that waiting time, God was building his character. God was strengthening his heart. God was preparing him for something greater than what he had been asking for. And when the right time came, everything changed so quickly that he could hardly believe it. The gate that had been closed for so long swung wide open, and he stepped into a season of blessing that was far beyond what he had hoped for. But looking back, he realized something. If that door had opened any earlier, he wouldn't have been ready. The waiting wasn't wasted. It was necessary. That's the part we often miss. We think waiting is wasted time. We think nothing is happening. But God is always doing something in the waiting. Sometimes He's working on the situation, aligning circumstances that we don't even know about. Other times He's working on us, preparing our hearts, refining our character, teaching us to trust Him more deeply. Because sometimes the gate isn't opening, yet not because God is saying no, but because He's saying not yet. I'm still getting you ready. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't see anything right away. You water it, you wait, and from the surface it looks like nothing is happening. But underground, roots are growing. Foundations are being laid. Life is stirring, even though you can't see it. And when the time is right, that seed breaks through the soil and you see what's been growing all along. That's what God is doing in your life. You may not see it, but the roots are growing. The foundation is being laid. And when the time is right, you will see what He's been preparing all along. But in the waiting, the enemy will try to discourage you. He'll try to convince you that God has forgotten. He'll whisper that nothing is changing, so you might as well give up. But don't believe those lies. God is not a God of delay. He is a God of perfect timing. He is never late. He knows exactly when to open the right gate for you. And when He does, you will step through, not a moment too soon and not a moment too late. So while you wait, don't lose heart. Keep trusting, keep praying, keep believing. God is faithful. What he has promised he will do. Your waiting is not in vain. He is working in ways you cannot see. And when that gate opens, you will know that every moment of waiting was worth it, because God's timing is always perfect. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to trust God after we face disappointment. You prayed for the door to open, but it stayed closed. You thought the opportunity was right, but it slipped through your fingers. You believed that relationship was from God, but it fell apart. And in those moments, it can feel like something in your heart breaks. You begin to wonder if you heard God wrong. You question whether he's really guiding your steps. You feel hurt, maybe even a little angry. God, why did you let this happen? I thought this was it. I thought this was the gate you were opening for me. But what I've learned is that sometimes God's greatest blessing is a closed door. Sometimes what we see as a rejection is actually his protection. Sometimes the gate we were so desperate to walk through was leading somewhere we weren't meant to go. We thought it was good, but God saw what we could not see. He saw the road ahead. He saw the struggles, the pain, the things that could have led us away from his best. So in his love, he closed that door, not to hurt us, but to lead us to something better. There was a woman I met who had her heart set on a particular job. It was everything she had dreamed of. She prayed, she prepared, she believed it was from God, but when the decision came, they chose someone else. She was devastated. She felt like all her effort had been wasted, like God had let her down. But a year later, the company she had applied to collapsed. People lost their jobs. Families were affected. And during that same year, God led her to a different position, one that brought her greater joy, stability, and purpose than she ever imagined. What she thought was a painful rejection was actually God's hand guiding her to something better. That's what we need to remember. God sees the full picture. We see only a piece. We see the closed gate and think it's the end, but God sees the path beyond it. He knows what is waiting on the other side, and if he closes a door, it's because he has a better one waiting down the road. It may not make sense now. It may hurt. It may feel like a loss. But trust this, God never takes something away without the intention of giving you something greater. Maybe you've been through a season of closed doors. Maybe you faced disappointment after disappointment. And now you're afraid to hope again. You're afraid to believe that God still has a plan. But he does. His plan for you is still good. His purpose for you has not been canceled. Those closed gates were not the end of your story. They were part of the journey. They were guiding you, shaping you, protecting you, because the right gate is still ahead. God is not finished with you. That closed door was not a sign that he's given up on you. It was a sign that he loves you too much to let you settle for less than his best. He is still working. He is still leading you. And when the time is right, he will open the gate that no man can close. It will be better than what you prayed for. It will be greater than what you hoped for. And when you step through it, you'll look back and say, now I see, God was leading me here all along. So don't let disappointment turn into doubt. Don't let a closed gate make you question God's goodness. He is faithful. He is leading you. And when the right gate opens, you will know God was working all along, and his plan for you is good, always good.